fashioned way of doing things. Oh, just it's being recorded there. And so one of the things I wanted to do in that class in economic botany was get students to understand how people value plants, how people can have, how we assign value. And it goes beyond just what you can pay for them, but how plants can have personal meaning. And so to do that, I wanted to convey to them the story of the tumor oaks. If there are any of you that are familiar with Auburn, anytime Auburn University wins a football game, they go out and throw toilet paper on the tumor oaks. Anytime Alabama loses, they go out and throw toilet paper on the tumor oaks. And what happened was one Alabama fan got tired of the way that the Auburn fans were disrespecting Alabama. And so he took pesticides and attempted to murder the tumor oaks. And I'm a botanist. I do consider this murder, premeditated and very serious. And it's an incredible story. And it's told in this podcast called Mobituaries by Mo Rocca. He's a personality in the media. And it's a great podcast. He does a lot of interesting things, but he tells the story of the tumor oaks, the man who attempted to murder them, how he's viewed as a hero by some, a villain by others, hated by botanists worldwide, even gets into the topic that the people at Auburn were slowly killing the tumor oaks by putting toilet paper on them because they would have to take firefighting hoses to blast the toilet paper off. And as a botanist, I can tell you, trees don't like that. So anyhow, it's a great story, but I used that in class, and it was a wonderful, transformative class experience. And so then we had a pandemic, and I found myself with a lot of time to do my favorite thing, which is work in my garden and just listen to podcasts. And so here's some of the ones I listened to. These are some of my favorites. There's some true crime, some science, a lot of music history, some world history. But what got me most interested in this were these two over here, one called No Dogs in Space and one about The Clash, which are about punk music and the history of punk music. And the core of punk music as a movement is DIY, do it yourself. And I started thinking about this, and it's like, wow, if all these other people can make podcasts, I can do it. I can surely do this as well. And it fit really well with my research at the time, because when the pandemic hit, a grad student who was a TA in my lab, we collected data on how students use all of the educational media that we provided when we went online. And we got that paper published. It just came out in the Journal of College Science Teaching recently. We got that and just sort of showing what it is that makes students want to use educational media. And the take-home message from that paper is feeling part of a community, especially when they're online or they're remote, feeling that they are part of this group. And so that's something that I got to thinking about was, can I use podcasts to build community and convey information in my classes as we're in the pandemic? So I've been teaching a large introductory biology class to anywhere, depending on the semester, 250 to 500 students online. And so this was an incredible experience. I'm glad it happened. I wouldn't have learned to do some things if we hadn't had a pandemic. Now, I'm not saying I like pandemics. Pandemics generally very bad, but I like what it caused, the changes it stimulated in my teaching. And so let's get back to podcasts. Why use them? What's great about them? Why not just show a movie or a video? And that's because podcasts have certain features and what we call affordances, things that they allow you to do that different types of media maybe can't. And so one of the things you can think about with a podcast versus watching a video is you can do other things. I have a lot of commuting students. They can listen to a podcast, and several of them told me that specifically and unsolicited. I can listen to a podcast episode when I'm driving to work, or other students when I'm running or exercising. You can't do that with a video. It's highly discouraged to watch YouTube while driving to work each day. And so you've got this accessibility. It's very informal. It doesn't take the data access or really all of the resources that can even be required for video. And then the final thing, you can be creative. You can do your own thing. That's, for me, I like that. I do have sort of an artistic side, and this allows me to get that out a little bit. And it's also very cheap. I've tried to make videos. I have made videos for my classes. It's expensive. It takes a lot of work. It eats up data access. Some students, it can be hard. You have to have broadband access sometimes. And it's very expensive to make videos. It takes a lot of time. All of those problems go away with a podcast. So they have a lot of features which make them useful. And another thing about them, and this gets into the work that Drew and other folks out of that lab have worked on, which is that podcasts have different genres, which allow you to achieve different goals because of their features. And so two big categories that I work in are called content acquisition podcasts. These tend to be shorter, really direct, specific information or descriptions they are trying to convey. And so you can see the different types of them. And then the ones that I really get into, I like narrative nonfiction, telling stories, getting into different sort of non-fictional types of things, interviews, and really trying to bring news stories to the students. Because, I mean, think about it. How many times have you heard genetics talked about in terms of Mendel's peas? Now, Mendel's great. Peas are awesome. It's a very simple system, but everybody's heard about that. We need new examples for a lot of these things. And we just get the standard ones you find in textbooks all the time. And I'm not saying they're bad. We just need some other ones. But anyhow, you can bring things in. You can bring in the personal experience. I mean, like Carlos mentioned, I've got the Cooper bison skull episode. The Cooper bison skull is the oldest intentionally painted artifact ever discovered in North America. I got to talk to the guy that found it, and he's awesome. And just the whole story of how they found it is amazing. So there's just something completely new to that. And then there's another genre, chat show, which I haven't gotten into, but just think about people sitting and talking back and forth. So imagine maybe two students talking in an episode about how to solve Hardy-Weinberg problems. I'm hoping to get that episode made, but we'll see how it goes. So anyhow, those are some just things on the background of podcasts, but how they've been used in education. The review by Hugh, this is a really good one. If you get a chance, you should look at it. What she showed is that the way that podcasts, all of our studies of podcasting in education, well, at least 95% at a minimum, they've looked at these situations where the podcast is independent and unconnected to any real class session in some way. So for example, you can have it just duplicate a class session. This is that so-called profcast. I record my lecture, I post it, and then if you weren't able to be in class or if you want to study before a test, you can go back and listen to it. In theory, students tend to not listen to them, is what they found in a lot of studies. Or maybe the podcast is a supplement, a little bit of extra information for those students who want to know something else about a phenomenon. But as you see, that's related to one class session, maybe, but nothing about the next one. What I want to do is break out of that and go more to this model where the podcast is linking class sessions. So you've got a session where you're talking about something that then leads to the podcast where they're getting information in some form so that I don't have to deliver that information in class. We can actually spend time in class doing other interesting things. So this is a lot like flipping, but we're using audio instead of video for that. And that's just the basic idea. And so what we're going to do is I want to show you an example of how I use podcasts. And so what this has to do with is the Pleistocene megafauna extinction episode, which talks about what we know about the mass extinction in North America, where the megafauna, the big animals, all died off. And what this episode included was a faculty member and researcher from the University of Oklahoma's Sam Noble Museum, and also their head of exhibits. He was a hoot. I met him one day and we got to talk about the exhibits and everything. And so I want to get his take on it because he knows a lot about these exhibits and everything there. So that's what this is all about. So it's narrative nonfiction. And what I'm trying to get students to do is think about trophic dynamics, climate change, invasive species, what megafauna even are, why we should care about them, and then modeling, predicting, and a lot of those process of science kinds of things. So to give you some context, you are a student in introductory biology. It's your second semester theoretically, and you've been studying trophic cascades with me. And what we've been talking about are different examples where we can see these different food webs, and you can see the flow of energy and materials up through this food web. And we're thinking about trophic cascades. So what happens when we take out a top predator, or maybe if we have extra nutrition, maybe something in that causes a boost in producers. So this is what we've been talking about, is this type of trophic interactions. And we've been looking at situations, for example, like this, where we see that as the number of wolves goes up, the number of deer goes down. As the number of deer goes up, the number of trees go down. So we see this relationship that the number of wolves influences the numbers of trees in an area. And that's something we think about and how that's been seen in systems. And then we talk about how adding people into this And so this is what I want you to pay attention to, is to think about, we've got these black arrows that are going to be in our model and this figure I'm going to give you in a little bit, and you're going to put in the blue arrows and think about whether something is a positive effect, or a negative effect. So if we think about this, we put humans in, humans have a negative effect on wolves, but the humans having a negative effect on wolves has a positive effect on deer. And so that increase in the deer population, because they don't have predators, well, that's kind of a bad thing for the trees. So more humans are actually bad for trees. That's how this kind of works out. And of course, we talk about how that ties into some other things like the aquatic plants and all of those animals that exist there. And so just another example that they've looked at in this class is one where we're looking at starfish. And so this is the work of Bob Payne, where they looked at the tidal pools, where we found that starfish were keystone species that kept the mussels and under control, and clams and everything. But whenever Bob Payne came in and had a negative effect on the starfish by taking them out, that was great for the mussels, and they outcompeted everything else. So that's the kind of idea we're working with here. I even put in one more about sort of the sea web that Jim Estes looked at. You have kelp fed on by sea urchins, and the otters eat that. Well, whenever the orca started eating and having a negative effect on the otters, that caused a growth. So it's great for the sea urchins, their populations went up, but it was bad then for the kelp, because the kelp forest got wiped out. So that's what you all are going to work with. And so I'm going to stop the share right here so that I can get this working and share something with you right now. So give me just a moment. What I'm going to do is drop a couple of files into the chat, and then you will be sent off into breakout rooms. And so what I am giving you, this first one, okay, yeah, that's got to be it. All right. So I am sharing some slides with you now, and you are going to go into breakout rooms. And in that breakout room, you will have the slide that you can open up, and it'll have two different food webs. They're basically the same Pleistocene food webs. And and you'll have that set up. And down in the corner, you will see a couple of icons. And one of them, it's a human with a spear, and there's also fire, and then you've got your arrows. And then the other one labeled slide B, it just has animals. We don't want to worry about the humans, but if you want to think about increased fire and climate change. So what I'd like for you to do is, if you go into those breakout rooms, you can then start putting in how you think either the inclusion of humans eating and hunting more mastodons, how that might have affected the dynamics of that system. What would have been a positive effect that would have rippled through the system? What might have been a negative effect? Or you can go over to slide B and think about the effects of increasing temperatures and increasing fires on that system. And so you can go and work on that. There's not a right answer. There's not necessarily a wrong answer, but we can work on that in your groups and just come up with one slide, and we can talk about that a little bit. If anyone wants to, we can just sort of stay here and talk out loud to work our ways through that. If there's anyone who would like to work through it that way and maybe doesn't want to go into a breakout room. So before we send you to the breakout rooms, any questions or comments? Anything I can clarify? All right, so we'll send you to the breakout rooms. If anyone wants to stay here and work on that, we can. And give you like 5 to 10 minutes. If you get done with it, you can come back to the main room, and that way we can assess how folks are doing. But you're not going to have to share anything. We're not going to have to turn in any homework. We just want to have you work through those diagrams and play with it. So if we're good,
We're good. You want me to open the rooms?
Yep, let's open the rooms and send everybody away that wants to go. And anyone that wants to stay here and work on that with us, more than welcome to stay.
Okay, here we go.
Hello, Drew.
Hello, Phil. I figured I'd stick around. Long time no see.
Yeah, and I was wondering, it's like, okay, what if Drew shows up?